Hello, everyone. Good evening. Let me first thank Siraj Hashmi. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Want to thank Siraj Narsi and the Pakistan Association of Greater Houston for hosting me at this very special event. It's an honor for me to be here with you all. I also acknowledge Consul General Chaudhry, as well as Ambassador Kumber and others dignified attendees this evening. And of course, most importantly, I wish Pakistan a happy Independence Day. So I will deliver these remarks in English because my Urdu isn't yet ready for prime time. Working on it. So I'm here tonight to make a declaration of sorts, one that earlier on, as President Trump prepared to return to power, I would not have expected to be making today. And that declaration is that the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is enjoying a resurgence, a revival, a renaissance. Pick any R word that you would like to describe a relationship that has strengthened in a big way after some lean moments in the recent past. So what I'll do in these comments is I'll explain why one would not have expected the relationship to resurge in this way, and I'll also discuss what might be driving the resurgence. I'll also talk about why, in my view, this resurgence actually risks being a brief one, and then I'll conclude by discussing how the US and Pakistan can truly cement a robust partnership in the coming months and years. So why did I not expect to be making this declaration? Why should we not have expected an improvement in ties during these early months of Trump 2.0? I mean, after all, as this audience will know, and as Consul General just noted, the US-Pakistan relationship has had its share of ups and downs. It's been a roller coaster. Its history is marked by many downs and ups. Quite frequently, bad periods have been followed by better periods. So why not expect a better period now? Because, in my view, when the second Trump administration took office in January, there were so many signals and trend lines pointing toward a relationship that would actually struggle. And let me briefly identify some of those signals and trend lines. First, the Trump administration, including the president himself, have quite a few people at the very top known for being harsh critics of Pakistan in the past. No one will easily forget that infamous tweet that Trump posted on New Year's Day early on in his term, referring to Pakistan and its lies and deceit. That was the president that said that many years ago. Second, the Trump administration's rigidly transactional approach to foreign policy means that it's not receptive to pitches from Pakistan or any country about its strategic importance, from its key location to its large population. Third, many of the key areas of cooperation during the Biden era, in the years immediately preceding the present, have now become irrelevant. Clean energy, climate change, these are not areas of interest for the Trump administration. Development cooperation, the administration, of course, has frozen foreign aid and dismantled USAID. Fourth, this administration has so many key priorities elsewhere. Ending wars, pursuing trade talks, dealing with matters closer to home. Now, yes, it is worth noting that bilateral ties did enjoy some success during the first Trump administration, after the relationship got off to a rough start after that aforementioned Twitter post from the president, which was later followed by a decision to suspend most US security assistance to Pakistan. So Trump later, in his first term, invited Imran Khan, then Pakistan's prime minister, to the White House. There were quite a few high-level engagements at that time, but I would argue that that improvement in ties was a bit deceptive. It was highly tactical, it was narrowly focused. Trump back then wanted to negotiate a withdrawal from Afghanistan, and he wanted Pakistan to help because of its access to the Taliban. So predictably, President Trump began his current administration by not really doing or saying much at all about Pakistan. By contrast, as you all know, he invited Narendra Modi to the White House. There was a lot of high-level US-India engagement. Marco Rubio met with Dr. Jaishankar. J.D. Vance went to India. He met with Modi there. A lot of talk about moving the relationship forward. None of that really seemed surprising back at that time. But then, of course, things went sideways and fast. And I think one of the earliest indications of the shift in US-Pakistan relations came in early March, when in his first joint address to Congress, President Trump thanked Pakistan for helping the US apprehend a terrorist. Who would have thought that in that speech, President Trump would have thanked one country and that it would be Pakistan? But that's what happened. Then came a flurry of high-level engagements. Private US investors started showing up in Pakistan. A senior US government delegation went to Pakistan for a critical minerals conference. Pakistani crypto officials met senior authorities at the White House. And then, of course, as we all know, Pakistan's army chief was invited to a White House lunch with Trump. And most recently, Pakistan was one of the very few countries to get a trade deal with the US with reduced tariffs. And it has inked new energy deals with the United States to boot. There's an oil reserve development accord announced by President Trump on social media. And also, as I understand it, the US plans to ship crude oil to Pakistan for the first time, starting in October. And of course, on the flip side, as we all know, US ties with India have nosedived and crash landed. So why are we seeing this resurgence in US-Pakistan ties? Let me offer a few possible explanations. One is what I would describe as a holdover effect. So I would argue that US-Pakistan relations were actually in a fairly good place in the few years preceding Trump's return to power. They were not deep, they were not multifaceted, there were not extensive high-level engagements as there are now, but they were generally friendly and crisis-free with just one or two key exceptions, one perhaps being Pakistan's ballistic missiles program, which as you will recall prompted some sanctions from the US. One key reason why you had relatively good relations in the few years before Trump returned to power is that some of the biggest tension points in earlier years had become irrelevant. This includes in particular tensions related to the US-led war in Afghanistan, and especially long-standing US allegations of Pakistani support for violent actors that threatened and targeted US troops in Afghanistan. Of course, the war in Afghanistan, it ended in 2021, just about 4 years ago, in fact. So in other words, there has been scope to advance and expand relations, even despite the obstacles that I mentioned earlier on. Additionally, in the same category of holdover effects, officer-to-officer ties, and more broadly, the US-Pakistan military partnership have always been quite strong. And this has been a constant throughout much of the history of US-Pakistan relations, even at difficult moments. And despite the irony, from a US perspective at least, that some of the very Pakistani policies that have concerned the US the most over the years, especially what the US has viewed as Pakistan's sponsorship of militant actors, have been developed and managed by the establishment. These officer-to-officer ties have been nurtured by many years of military education and training programs, which have entailed Pakistani military officers studying and training with US counterparts in the US and until relatively recently in Pakistan as well. So keep in mind that when Trump suspended most security aid to Pakistan early in his first term, that initially included what's called IMET, the US International Military and Education Training Program. But that IMET suspension was soon reversed because US officials knew how important it was for the US military. These consistently cordial officer-to-officer ties have facilitated what I would describe as consistent high-level military engagements, which has included most recently Field Marshal Munir's close partnership with General Kurilla, until recently the CENTCOM head. But these high-level military engagements are not new. Many recent Pakistani army chiefs, excluding the present one, not the present one, have attended training and education programs in the United States as younger officers. But still, despite all this, few would have expected this rapid flurry of high-level bilateral engagement and pledges of multifaceted cooperation of the last few months. There's something else that must be driving this. So what is it? Here, I would point to Pakistan. Pakistan's government, Pakistan being very savvy about its approach to what is a very unconventional US president and administration. For President Trump, international relations are shaped less by strategic partnerships and even geopolitical interest, and more so by transactional and indeed commercial considerations. So what Pakistan has done, and I think it's done it very well, is that it has honed in on the opportunities in the world that interest the Trump administration the most, and it has successfully pitched itself as a partner to help the administration seize on those opportunities. So I'll point to three examples. First, Pakistan knows that the US is keen to tap into critical mineral opportunities around the world. So it's flagged its massive critical mineral wealth, invited the US to engage on that, including through the Mineral Investment Forum earlier this year that I mentioned. Second, it knows that this administration is keen to tap into crypto. So Pakistan has now pitched itself as a crypto partner, having now established a new crypto council fairly recently, and taken steps recently to start legalizing crypto. And third, and this one is a bit different because it's not focused on commercial issues, is counterterrorism. Pakistan knows the Trump administration is not interested in military operations, much less wars, but it is determined to do what it has to do to apprehend terrorists and other violent and bad actors that threaten and target the US. So Pakistan has been able to pitch itself as a player because of its location and its capacities that can help the US track down Islamic State terrorists that have hit the US, and it has done so. I'd also point to two other ways in which Pakistan has successfully cultivated ties with an unconventional administration. And here, I apologize if this comes across as a bit provocative, but this is my sense. One has been capitalizing on President Trump's strong emphasis on personal and family ties. I don't think it's coincidental that Pakistan has sought to engage with a US crypto company that has close connections to several of Trump's close family members. And here, I'll be very blunt, flattery doesn't hurt, with this president. And I think Pakistan understands that. I could make a reference to the Nobel Peace Prize nomination. Now, this is not to say that this resurgence has been fully driven by transactional and commercial factors alone. I would argue that the strategic dimension does loom large here as well. Pakistan, I would argue, has effectively depicted itself as a unique player in the world. It has been able to be very tactical about its strategic importance, and that includes pitching itself as one of those rare countries that has very good relations with China, with Iran, to somewhat of a lesser extent with Russia, with the Arab Gulf states, and with the West. And I think this is something that is of interest to the president, as it should be. Now, I would argue that we should not overstate this resurgence, as real as it is. I want US-Pakistan relations to succeed. We all want US-Pakistan relations to succeed. Both US and Pakistani interests are well served by a cordial and active relationship. But when I think about it, sometimes I'm not sure if the relationship is if the current relationship is the most sustainable one over the long term as currently configured. And I say that because there are a number of question marks and obstacles. So many of Pakistan's critical minerals are in insecure, terror-prone areas. This means considerable risks for those looking to exploit them. And if you look at crypto, it's still a work in progress in Pakistan. And I think it's also tough to square the large consumption of water and energy required by crypto assets with Pakistan's shortages of both those resources. As for counterterrorism, we saw a very strong positive joint statement after the US-Pakistan bilateral dialogue on counterterrorism, which happened yesterday in Islamabad. Shows that there's a lot of potential there. And we've seen that there's been very real, meaningful cooperation on counterterrorism as made public by the president in his joint address some months ago. But the problem, as I see it, is that when it comes to counterterrorism, the US wants to work with Pakistan on tracking down militants that threaten the US. Now, if you look at some of the recently published US intelligence estimates, interestingly, they drive Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, as a potential future threat to the US. So that suggests there might be some scope to expand cooperation to focus on TTP as well. But the Trump administration, in my view, will not have much interest in restoring security assistance to Pakistan, and certainly no interest in kinetic operation. I think we could see intelligence sharing ramp up when it comes to counterterrorism, but I don't necessarily see things going beyond that. So let me conclude with a few quick thoughts on how to make this relationship work over the long term and what to focus on. First, the two sides should look at opportunities to expand wider U.S. investment in Pakistan. And I think the ideal vehicle for such investment would be the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, or DFC. This is a U.S. government tool. It's been around for a few years. It's up for reauthorization in Congress, though I suspect it will get it. The DFC, what it does, for those of you that don't know about it, it advances U.S. interests abroad by mobilizing capital, very much in line with the Trump administration's commercial approach to foreign policy. So the DFC currently has a small, very small portfolio in Pakistan, one of the smallest of all the DFC portfolios. Now I think is the time to ramp it up, the moment's right. Given that Chinese investment in Pakistan, at least through CPEC, has slowed down a bit. So I think there's a nice window. Critical minerals are a key part of DFC's portfolio right now, so maybe DFC can pursue some of those opportunities in Pakistan, but it's worth looking to expand that portfolio to hedge against the risks that would accompany deploying capital into critical mineral activities. Second, the US and Pakistan should do more cooperation within multilateral settings. Strong bilateral partnerships, in my view, entail working together with other countries and in regions further afield. I think that there are various untapped opportunities in this regard. One would involve Central Asia. The Trump administration is quite intrigued by engagement opportunities there because of its gas riches and critical minerals, among other things. Pakistan, I think we can all agree, is very interested in Central Asia engagement. It sees it as a highly strategic area. It's already been pursuing some connectivity projects there, including a rail project with Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. And it's also, Central Asia is also a big part of this envisioned shift, eventually a shift from emphasizing geopolitics to emphasizing geoeconomics in Pakistan's foreign policy. I would also argue that Central Asia is an area where Pakistan can be an advantage in competition with India, given that India lacks direct access, land access to Central Asia. So there's all kinds of good reasons for Pakistan and the US to want to focus on Central Asia and together. The Middle East, volatile and complex as it is, could also be an important space for US-Pakistan cooperation. Pakistan, and as I mentioned before, it has close ties with all the Arab Gulf states, and it has friendly ties with, and of course, a shared border with Iran. Pakistan's close engagement with Iran in recent weeks, in my view, is another reason why the Trump administration has been so keen to reach out to Pakistan, and especially since the Israel-Iran war. Pakistan's mediation role vis-a-vis Iran is something that can be helpful to both American and Pakistani interests. Third and finally, and maybe this is the most important point to make, it's time to better privatize US-Pakistan relations. So many of you will remember Mark Grossman, who was a senior US official some years back, focused on Pakistan and South Asia. So he said some time ago that about 90% of the US-Pakistan relationship takes place through government-to-government channels. That means that only 10% was channeled through the business sector, academia, and other non-government entities. I'm not sure if that figure has gone up in more recent years, but it really should. And here, I come to you all, and this was mentioned by the Consul General, the Pakistani diaspora can really be a key catalyst in privatizing. Have I been cut off? I'll just project. I was wrapping up. Pakistani Americans. Thank you. Pakistani Americans, including some of you here tonight, I'm sure, work in high growth sectors, tech, clean energy, health, so many other fields. The diaspora boasts the skills, the networks, and other resources to help bolster Pakistan's development. And so my view is that ideally Pakistani Americans, along with diaspora members elsewhere around the world, could contribute to strengthening these areas, these sectors in Pakistan, and could also contribute to the reforms process in Pakistan and other structural fixes that would bring more sustainability, long-term sustainability to Pakistan's economy and to US-Pakistan relations more broadly. I would argue, yes, I mean, Pakistan's economic situation has stabilized considerably in recent months, particularly on a macroeconomic level. But one could argue that there's still a number of structural challenges in Pakistan's economy. If Pakistan develops a stronger economy over the long term. This will make it a much more attractive partner to the United States and other partners beyond. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much for hearing me out.